Greetings! I find Flanagan's following statement that supports his claim that having a life worth living requires both knowledge of one's self-identity and self-expression, but I both agree and dissent with the implications of the following statement. Begin quote, "Philosophers from Aristotle to the present, as well as anthropologists, have taught us that in every culture, becoming a self capable of expressing anything of worth requires a community, as does self-expression. I'd say that from an objective standpoint, expressing anything of worth does require a community, or at least one other rational sentient being, or maybe more simply, a self-conscious thinking thing, to judge the worth of one's actions or life, and it certainly requires others to live in the first place, because we are a species that requires the care of parents as infants and children in order to survive. Or else one would surely die soon after being born, but one does not have to continue to rely on others in order to live a life that he or she deems is worth living for one reason or another, if she/he so chooses. I.e., life can be worth living from an objective or a subjective standpoint, rather, with or without a community. Living one's life as a hermit, and certainly the choice itself to live this way, would definitely imply knowledge of one's self-identity, and would be a means of self-expression, while the judgment of one's own life in this context as worthwhile is certainly ephemeral and verifiable by oneself, and comes with one's life and goes with one's death. There is no difference between this judgment of life as worthwhile and the judgment of the same as a part of a community of one's peers, other than the fact that such a worth, or lack thereof, would be verifiable by more than one individual. For humans came and will eventually leave the face of the earth, just as an individual might. However, I can definitely support the following quote from Flanagan wholeheartedly, for having an identity and expressing it seems to be both a central desire of humankind and an element, if not all, of what makes life worth living. This quote is as follows. Begin quote, "Here is where leaving parts of ourselves in the world by having changed that world in directions that matter, that are positive, lessens the threat of my demise. This is a kind of naturalistic transcendence, a way each of us, if we are lucky, can leave good-making traces beyond the time between our birth and death. To believe this sort of transcendence is possible, I guess, to have a kind of religion. It involves believing that there are selves that we can, in self-expression, make a difference, and if we use our, quote, truth detectors, and, quote, good detectors, well, that difference might be positive, a contribution to the cosmos," end quote. I believe that it is true to an extent that we have selves of a sort, and that quote, we can in self-expression make a difference, or at least it is possible to make a difference. Nonetheless, I find a kind of ironic and discomforting egotism in all of this talk of self-expression or making a difference, and how these things make a life worth living. While it certainly seems that these things are central desires to humankind, the question arises, is it really necessary to express oneself for life to be worth living? If the concept of oneself or identity is somewhat amorphous and changes over time, how can one even hope to truly pin down an identity and fully express it in the first place. It seems that even if people refuse to believe in a transcendental, unchanging, continuous soul, they will try to insert their ego into the question of the meaning of life or what makes life worth living, looking for a permanent identity, and that by expressing this identity, they can hope or they can make this identity last or having a lasting impact throughout the eons. They are constantly looking for a way to escape or transcend death, even though there is great indication that inevitably their lives will come to very little, for as I have pointed out, both the self and the whole of humankind are ephemeral, and such a way of making life worth living is fleeting, for humans came and will eventually leave the face of the earth, just as an individual might. Ultimately, it seems ignorant of the state of reality to ascribe some kind of solid, objective meaning to life. Though, as I have ventured to point out with the help of Taylor, some semblance of subjective meaning that is unique to every last living creature that can be derived from the pursuits and actions of life and the desire to continue these pursuits and actions, and can be obtained by simply continuing to live one's life. And it seems more realistic to say that living for and by the improvement of one's community and the world, or for and by oneself, if that is not possible, makes life worth living. If only for the length of this lifetime, although one's actions could have a lasting impact on future generations of life. Thank you guys for listening.